Welcome to Cut to the Chase, where we talk about compelling legal, regulatory, and public interest information and news. Your host is Gregg Goldfarb, an attorney, entrepreneur, investor, and activist.
It's time for our next episode of our favorite podcast, Cut to the Chase, with our favorite guest, Mike Burns from Moss Law Firm, on our favorite topic, 3M and the settlement. How are you doing today, Mike?
Greg, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on the show again today. I appreciate it.
You know, I know it was like breaking news, the case settled, everybody was like, rah, rah, where's my money? And now we're back to reality and lots of moving parts, deadlines. Do I do expedited? Do I do full review? Can I do expedited and review? All these things. Let's break it down. So let's try to simplify it as much as you possibly can and break it down for us. Tinnitus, hearing loss, or tinnitus and hearing loss. Those are basically the three different things that the clients, the 3M victims will have, right? Did I get that
That's
right?
correct. That's
okay.
Correct.
So let's break it down now.
Well, sounds good, Greg. I appreciate you having me on. And just like you and I, we chatted a little bit before, everything's broken down into categories. And we've talked to our clients, and that's really what's important right now is if you're a client in this case, make sure you stay in touch with your law firm. It's very important that you continue this conversation that's going on with your law firm, their paralegals, their lawyers that are talking to you in this case. So, Greg, on the expedited process, it was just like we explained on the last show, broken down into basically 4 or 5 categories on the expedited one. The first one is pays out $5,000 if you have undocumented tinnitus. If you have documented tinnitus, that pays out $10,000. And also, if you have slight hearing loss, that pays out, or tinnitus and slight hearing loss, that pays out at $10,000. If you have mild hearing loss, that pays out at $16,000. If you have moderate hearing loss, that pays out at $24,000. All that has to be documented, and you'll see that through your process with your audiograms. So that's why you want to stay in touch with your lawyers and as their paralegals when they reach out to you, so that they can go through the expedited process with you. So, and they'll be reaching out to you before the end of the year because you probably already got a letter from them. And they're trying to gather this information to see where you fit in the process, whether it's the expedited process or if it's a little bit drawn out process. And that's where it's going to be a review process where you'll be looking at larger dollars. However, there's a time factor that's involved in that. So they're going to help you weigh that out and help you make the decision. For example, if you had, let's say, moderate hearing loss, and you're at the $24,000 range. There may be some ways that you could get a little bit more money, and let's say based on the points and what you score out. But let's say you had to wait another 3 years to get that money, and all we're talking about is maybe $5,000, $8,000. Is it worth you from a net standpoint after how much your lawyer gets, how much you get? Maybe it's only a $3,000-$4,000 difference. Is it worth the wait for an additional 3 years to get that additional $3,000-$4,000? So that's why you have to stay in touch with your lawyers and your paralegals with your law firms so that they can help you make those decisions that are most beneficial to you. Judge Rogers has been really, really good, and she gets in the weeds on these cases, and she's going to make sure that the clients in these cases receive 50% in the fund. So Greg, sometimes you have to adjust your fees on a case because you want to make sure that your client gets at least half the money in the settlement. Judge Rogers is going to make sure that the clients get at least half the money in the settlement. And if the client's not getting that, she's going to review those cases and require the lawyers to reduce the fees. So any law firm that sees that their client is getting less than 50%, they're going to reduce the fees so that the court doesn't come in there and reduce it for them, because she's going to give you that option, but she's going to be watching it with a very keen eye. So I think that's going to be good. Like we were talking about earlier, Greg, you know, the first thing that happened was the $10 million that was placed into the common benefit to allow for the administration of the MDL. The second thing that happened was in late September, right about the 1st of October, was the bellwether plaintiffs. Their funds were transferred from 3M. That was close to $250 million to pay the bellwether clients. I believe there were 16 of the bellwether clients. So that money was transferred. The next big transfer, the next big issue is going to be the fairness hearing, which I think you and I spoke about before we went on the air, and that's December 11th. That's going to be in Pensacola, Florida at 9 a.m. before Judge Rogers. And that's where the plaintiffs and the defendants from 3M are going to get together, and they're going to discuss the sale of the $1 billion worth of 3M stock and how that's going to be converted so that the plaintiffs get that $1 billion. And so that's going to be discussed at that particular hearing. The long and short of that is 3M is gonna proffer that stock, and it's going to be converted to cash. So the plaintiffs are going to get $1 billion, no matter how much stock it takes up over a 10-day average, whatever that price is. So that equals $1 billion, and that will be converted, and that will be deposited into the plaintiff's MDL fund. The other thing that's
wait, let me get a timeout. Timeout. It's a lot to swallow there.
A lot of stuff. Yeah, I'm sorry.
All right. So, you know, people heard that there was like a $6 billion settlement. Right. That was like the headline news, a little bit more than that. But it's not like a scenario where they just wrote a check for $6 billion, and put it in some trust fund, and there it is. I mean, this is something that this $6 billion is going to be funded over a period of time. And part of that funding is the sale of $1 billion worth of stock. But
that's correct. It's staggered over time. That's correct.
But the clients, nobody should really be concerned about, you know, oh boy, they're going to sell $1 billion worth of stock, and then the next day the value of it goes down to nothing because they sold all the stock. It's essentially $1 billion.
That's right. It is. And Greg, you may do buy more stock than I do, or vice versa. But in all likelihood, 3M will probably purchase their stock back, is what they would do. That way they keep control of that $1 billion worth of stock. So they don't have to worry about, hey, we put $1 billion worth of stock out there and somebody else grabbed the stock. And so now they lost control. In all likelihood, they will be the ones that purchase back.
Buy back. Yeah. I'm sure there was some tax issue or shareholder issue, but it's nothing for the people out there that are, you know,
nothing to be concerned about.
Nothing to be concerned about. Okay. The $250 million for the bellwether. These are the 13 plaintiffs that won.
That's correct. The plaintiffs.
So they're paid, or
their money has been transferred. So now what they're doing is that money was transferred right at, like, I think it was September 28th. I may be wrong on the date, but that money was transferred. And so what happens at that, they process any liens that medical liens that they may have had, and all that'll take care. And then they will get paid. They'll generate the closing statements. They'll get paid. And the lawyers that worked on those particular cases, they'll get paid.
Yeah, and good for them. All right. So, and let's go back to this 50%, because some people are like, 50%? What do you mean I'm getting less than 50%? I signed a 40% contract or whatever. And really what it is you signed a 40% contract plus reimbursing your attorneys for
lawyers' cost.
For their costs. And you also owe for liens.
Correct.
Let's explain, because a lot of people are going to hear liens. What's a lien? Like, why do I have to pay off a lien? What would give us a simple example of the lien?
So what happens on a lien, and another thing, Greg, and we'll go back and touch on this on the common benefits front. We'll talk about that as well. So another thing that happens whenever you have a personal injury settlement, which this is, the insurance company that paid for your medical bills has a right to collect money that they may have paid to the hospital or the doctor or whatever the medical group was, to recover that from your personal injury settlement. So let's just say that in this particular case that you got hearing aids, and so the insurance company paid $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, whatever it is for your hearing aids. So they may have a claim to your settlement for that amount of money, whether it was $1,000, $3,000, whatever that amount was. So what Archer does, who is the settlement administrator, they negotiate that lien that insurance company may have placed against your file and try and reduce that amount. And then that amount would come out of the plaintiff or the claimant side of the settlement is what would happen. So that would reduce some of the money that the claimant would receive. So the judge is going to make sure that that amount, whatever it may be, at least adds up to 50% of the settlement amount. And so the way she's calculating the settlement amount, whether it's 10,000 or 100,000, we use 100,000 because that's an easy number to see. The common benefit fund, which funded the entire litigation, all the depositions, all the trials and all that stuff, is 9%. So 9% comes off the top. So if you got $100,000 settlement, that means that $9,100 comes right off the top. So your settlement is $91,000. That's what you. So that's what she's going to calculate the attorney's fees, and the 50% is the 91. So not 100. So the 9 comes off the top. It goes into the common benefit fund, and then we start working from the new settlement amount, which would be 91,000.
Okay, so 91,000. You got a 40% contingency fee. 36,000 and change goes to your lawyer. Let's say your lawyer didn't spend any money on your case, but your insurance company or Medicare or Medicaid paid $4,000 for your hearing device. Right. So that would come off. So let's just say the negotiated lien amount drops down to 3,000. So you got 36 to your lawyer, 3 to the lien holder. That's 39. That would leave you with more than 50%. That would leave you with 40 and change. So you're good.
That'd be perfectly fine.
But if it was a scenario where let's talk about the 91,000, and somehow or another, after all the breakdowns, you're only getting 38, then the judge is going to require an adjustment to get you to 50% or 45,000.
So to make sure, yes. So the lawyer's not going to be making more money than you.
Gotcha.
In that particular case. But we're going to add all those numbers on your side of the equation are going to add up so that those numbers add up to more than what the lawyer's fees would have been.
All right. So before people get all like, what do you mean $9,000? What do you mean common benefit fund? Where did that money go to? Like, is that money off in the air? Up in the air?
Oh, so that money goes back to pay the expenses that you had for the trial, all the depositions, all the expert witnesses. That money, that's where that money goes to. And then there's a percentage that goes back to the lawyers. They get reimbursed for those expenses that they had to put into the
advance, yeah.
And then they share in a disbursement that is approved by the court on how much those lawyers that were in the leadership group would get compensated for their work on the common benefit, their work on the settlement, their work on the cases.
Yeah. Okay. And now let's talk about, we talked about the expedited. So people are there's a time frame for these clients to select expedited or full review.
Correct. And that first deadline is going to come up at the end of the year. And the other thing about that is the special master that oversees the allocation of the funds. That's Matt Garrison. He's coming up with frequently asked questions. So stay in touch with your law firm, because what's doing is Matt has weekly town hall meetings with the lawyers and the law firm. So questions that keep coming up, he answers those questions and processes everything through so that we can make sure that we have answers and a definitive process for all the clients to take care of any things that may arise, because there are things that you don't calculate, and so he's there to help resolve those and to solve those issues as we go forward in the settlement portion of the litigation.
All right, so let's just say I'm thinking, well, I'm listening to what you're saying, and I hear expedited, I'm gonna get paid quicker, but less. Is there like a way for me to kind of figure out if I do not do the expedited, how much I'm gonna get?
Yes, and that's why you need to make sure you stay in touch with your law firm, because there's a calculator, and that calculator will estimate what your settlement will be based upon your hearing loss, based upon your tinnitus, based upon any other factor that the special master may be considering, say, for example, PTSD, all those things that may contribute to your hearing loss, contributed to your tinnitus. And so he has a point system that assigns values to your degree of hearing loss and your degree of how things are intensified. And so what that does, that your law firm, every single one has the calculator, and they can look at your case, look at your medical records, calculate what your damages are going to be, so they can tell you, this is our best guesstimate of what you will receive if you go in the expedited process, and this is what you would receive if you went into the review process. So your lawyers will be able to tell you, okay, it's best for you because you're only gonna, if you went into this process over here, the review process, you would probably only gain an additional, and I just using a ballpark number, $3,000 if you go this route. So your better route would be better served if you went in the expedited process. And if you have extensive injuries and extensive damage and extensive hearing loss, then your best bet is to go into the complete review process, and you would enhance the dollars that you receive. It's going to take a little bit longer, but it would be worth your while. And your lawyer will be able to calculate that for you and let you know what you would likely receive.
All right, so expedited though is going to be a specific amount that you know, aside from whether you have a lien or not, but you'll know the gross amount. There's no,
correct.
It's not a point.
And it goes back to those amounts that we talk about: 5,000, 10,000, 10,000, 16, and 24,000. Those are the five.
And so let's say, you know what, I got tinnitus. I don't, my records really don't even show that, but I know I have tinnitus, $5,000. Right. When am I getting my money?
Well, so you should get your money. Let's say you complete the process at late December. You should see that money. That money could roll as early as first quarter 2024, second quarter 2024. All
right, but at that point that you make the selection of expedited, there's going to be a deadline, and then there's an administrator that has to deal with the liens before they decide, before they can make the payouts. So exactly. That process has to go through, and
that's what you'd be waiting on, is that process to be completed, and then you get your process, and then you get your check.
Okay, but if the full review, you're talking about points. Why are you talking about points and not dollars?
Well, because the points are going to determine the amount of dollars. So let's just, this is where you want to talk to your individual lawyer and your law firm, because when they're going to be able to calculate your damages, and I'll just have a discussion with you, not based upon reality, but just for discussion. So let's say that each point has X amount of $1,000 equated to it. You could put 5,000, 10,000. So if you had 7 points, let's say if in each one of the points had $10,000 associated with it, that would be $70,000. If it had $5,000 associated with each point, and you had 7 points, that would be $35,000. So what's going to happen is your lawyer is going to be able to calculate your points and then be able to calculate your damage based upon the dollars that are allocated to each point as it goes up to the system.
Has the formula been established to equate a point to dollars yet, or is this dependent upon how many people go expedited and how much money is left after that?
Well, in general, that's correct, but there is a basic calculator, so they can estimate based upon on how many people that they expect to be in expedited and how many people they expect to go through the process. So, like we discussed earlier, they anticipate about a little over 100,000 of the claimants and clients to go in the expedited process, and that's going to leave about 120 to 140,000 to be in the review process.
Full review, yeah.
Expedited process will probably take up about 25% of the funds, and then the balance, the 75% of the fund, less the bellwethers and the waive cases, will be the remaining 75% of the funds.
All right, so a lot of people are freaking out because they're hearing, oh my God, it's going to take 5 years to pay out. Realistically speaking, if they get through the expedited process, go through the liens and all that, and close that out, let's say by mid-24, why would it take another 4 years after that? I mean, is that 5 years just a number that's being thrown out to sort of give everybody a little breathing room here? And okay, we're going to try to get it done quicker, but a lot of it is dependent upon certain factors that are out of our control.
I think some of it is a little bit of both. I think you always give yourself, it's better to give yourself time on the back end, and that you don't want to overpromise, because that's when you really look bad. It's when you overpromise and tell somebody, oh, you're going to get paid in the next 30 days. And then the next thing you know, it takes a year. Then you look like a big fool. So you want to, you rather underpromise and overperform than overpromise and underperform. So I think that's part of it. I think because at the bulk of the size of the MDL, both in numbers of claimants and in dollars, I think that gives a little bit of relief to 3M as well, so that they can make their projections over periods of time. And so if you look at that, there are specific marks that the plaintiffs have to hit. Once they make those marks, then 3M has to make X amount of deposits into the common benefit fund. So it's a little give and take on both sides of the equation. Plaintiffs have to make the mark. When plaintiffs makes the mark, defendant 3M has to make the deposit. So it's planning on both sides of the equation is what it is.
All right, but at this point, do we know how many of the 200 some thousand cases and clients that are out there, how many of them, let's just say, have the smallest cognizable damage, the undocumented tinnitus?
Well, you can,
I got full-blown hearing loss. I'm a young guy, PTSD. It's really, demolished my whole life.
in reality, the answer to that question would be no, but we've made calculations, and that's what the special master, Matt Garrison, that's what his expertise is so that he can make these calculations, so that he can make the projections, so that he can understand how much money he's dealing with. So yes, in reality, the answer would be no to that question. But yes, there's some formulas that he can calculate, knowing, okay, this is how many people are going to be here. This is how many people is going to be here. So that way he knows how much money he's going to have to do A, B, and C when it comes down the road. So that's how that works.
Now, during the times that we've had podcasts, we've just kind of thrown out the figure of 250,000 veterans that, are in the case. And I hear that she's already dismissed 20,000 of those cases.
There were up to, I think it was up to 20,000 cases that were released. And Judge Rogers is very thorough when she does this. There were some cases that got inadvertently dismissed. Those cases back into the fold. And I think there was an order that just came out today, if I'm not mistaken, on cases that were dismissed because they didn't have information, like you didn't have your cell phone number, you didn't have your email address, other things that that cases that were dismissed where you didn't have your census form, you didn't have your DD 214, and she had to do that so that she can go through the process and know that she's dealing with a finite number that is beneficial to both sides. It's beneficial to the clients. It's beneficial to 3M at the same time, so we know what number of cases that we're dealing with.
All right, but for the purpose of for the client that's out there, not necessarily your client, and again, everybody's got to talk to their own lawyers. This is just sort of a, hey, let me wrap my brain around, let me hear it again from somebody else. Sometimes your lawyer might talk quick, you might not have understood it. But the deadline for the client, and the main thing that they're going to have to do is select between expedited and full review by the end of the year.
That's correct.
And obviously tell their lawyer that.
That's correct. They need to talk to their lawyer to make that decision with their lawyer. So if you're represented by Moss Law, if you're represented by Gregg Goldfarb and his law firm, you need to pick up the phone and call them. They're going to call you too, but don't wait. There's no reason why you're not stay in constant contact with your law firm. Ask them, hey, is there anything that you need me to do? Are there records that I need here? Is there anything you need me to sign? Because they're going to need you to sign something. And all this is going to be done electronically as well. So you're going to be doing e-documents, e-signing. Greg, I know you're familiar with that. So people are going to be doing that, and the court's going to accept that as an original signature.
Okay, now early on, I heard something that I have to believe is incorrect, that you could do expedited and full review.
No,
that's not correct. Okay,
not
right.
correct.
Yeah.
There is a part that allow you to do some expedited where you may be qualified for certain EIF, which is the extraordinary injury fund. You need you need to talk to your lawyer to see whether or not you qualify for that particular thing.
That's probably what I heard.
That's probably what you heard. Yes. So
yes.
Certain cases may also qualify for the extraordinary injury fund, but you need to speak with your lawyer so that they can go over your case and let you know whether or not you qualify for that.
And when would that have to be determined? When do you have to make that selection also at the end of the year?
That's all that needs to be done. Yes. At the end of the year.
So your lawyer is going to evaluate and tell you whether you qualify for the EIF.
That's correct.
Yeah. And so you could do the expedited and the EIF.
Could be if your case qualifies for it. Yes, you could. Yes.
So let's say you think. Go ahead.
You get 2 checks. You could get your settlement check, and then you could get an extraordinary injury fund check down the road.
All right. So what is the basic qualification for that?
Well, it's not going to be the first 2 cases right off the bat. It's not going to be a case that is undocumented. It's the 5,000 out the door. Okay, that's what you get, and it's not going to be the tinnitus only, documented, and slight hearing loss. Those 2 right there. So it's going to be whether or not it's those additional ones. So that takes up the tinnitus, mild hearing loss, tinnitus, moderate hearing loss. And I want you to double check with your law firm and talk to your lawyer and have your lawyer explain that to you. Okay. That's really important. But the first 2 are not going to qualify.
All right, let's say you have severe hearing loss and you want to get the expedited, and you say, I want the expedited and I want to try to get the EIF. And your lawyer says, yes, you qualify, or I think you qualify. Let's
stop that right there. If you have severe hearing loss, okay, you are not going to be involved in the expedited process, because the expedited process ends at moderate hearing loss. Okay, so if you have severe hearing loss, you are not going to be in the expedited process. You're going to be in a complete review. Okay.
So the person with moderate hearing loss might qualify for the EIF.
Correct.
And what's the basic formula for that?
Well, we're going to go back and look at that person and where they qualify. Moderate hearing loss, we're going to look at the shifts that we have in their hearing loss from their audiograms on the different levels, 2,000, 4,000, 6,000, 8,000 level. That's what we're going to look at. We're going to look at how their hearing loss has been progressive over the years, what their first audiogram shows, and then how it's increased over the time, time period. And let's say that has compounded, for example, and I'm just using this as an example. Let's say they have PTSD as well because of their moderate hearing loss and tinnitus and other things, and that is creating a major problem for them.
Yeah.
So now that's where Matt Garrison, the special master, is going to look at it. It's going to evaluate it. It's going to assign points to it, and also consider whether or not that person, let's say they have a value, then that person is entitled to this amount as an offer, and then extraordinary injury fund is on top of that original.
Okay, so I think the one category that we're missing is the people that had their cases worked up, the wave cases. They're getting a flat fee no matter what.
Well, the wave cases are going to get, on average, $150,000. So that's about 2,000 cases that you're looking at. Those clients are going to get on average $150,000.
Yeah.
To pay out those claims.
Yeah. Gotcha. All right. So just out of curiosity, what earplugs is the military providing the Army, the soldiers?
But it's not the CAV2s now. And
so
that's for sure. They've used a bunch of different ones since then. This like I said, this earplug was the only one of its type, and never been another one like that since. So they're definitely not using this one anymore.
Yeah. All right. Did we miss anything? Is there anything else people would like to hear that?
I'm sure there is something that we missed, and I'll be glad to come back on anytime in the future. Maybe sometime during the holidays after we do the fairness hearing.
Let's do that. That would be great.
Or the first of the year after we get to the deadline, or maybe even before that, so that we can make sure that everybody stays in touch with their lawyer. Reach out to your law firm, whether it be Moss and Goldfarb, whoever your lawyer is. Reach out to them right now and stay in touch with them, because your lawyer needs to talk to you, and you need to make an informed decision with your lawyer.
Yeah. All right. I think that's going to do it. I just want to say this. I know some people were like, oh my God, all these trials are big victories. I thought I was going to get a lot more. People are like, I can't believe, I thought, $1 million. I saw a lot of comments after our last show, whatever. People were, I guess, disappointed in the amount. But the reality is, people, what you don't realize is 6 people lost. They're getting 0. Okay. Right. That could have been you. You could have been trying your case 10 years from now. And you're going to get, and you lose, you get 0. There's no guarantees in this. Just the lawyers the plaintiff's lawyers, Mike, Brian, both Brian's, Jennifer Huckstra, were amazing trial lawyers. All this 10% or 9% that you're hearing that comes off the top, all the experts that they hired did an amazing job. But this is just the reality of it. It's an amazing settlement. It's going to take time. And, that's where we're at, folks. So, Mike, I appreciate you coming on the show. Every time I ask you, you come on. I love you, man. And listen, say hello to the cast for me, all right? That's all I can say.
I will.
I know that's all I'm allowed to say. All right, guy. All right,
buddy.
All right, thanks a lot. That'll do it for this episode of Cut to the Chase. If you have questions, you may have some questions here. You know what to do. And Mike, we'll get the in the show notes, we'll get a link to the FAQ so that people can look at that, because that might prompt other questions for them that they hadn't even thought about. All right.
Yep, that's good.
All right, man. Be well.
That's all for this episode of Cut to the Chase. But before you go, will you open up your podcast app and give us a 5-star review? You can also leave a comment about what you liked most or other topics you'd like us to cover. And please be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any upcoming shows. Thanks, everybody. Be safe out there.